Hi, I'm Dr. Alex Katehakis from Center for Healthy Sex here in Los Angeles, California. And today on my podcast, I have the pleasure of talking to Dawn Cartwright, who's a neo-tantric teacher. Dawn has spent her entire life devoted to the practice of sex and sexuality and bringing the erotic into our daily life. So stay tuned for this wonderful conversation with Dawn Cartwright. I think you'll find it scintillating and exciting, and you'll actually learn something about your sexuality that you didn't know before. First of all, thank you for coming to have this conversation with me. I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you about this in detail. I think I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. And I thought, when I was thinking about what do I want to ask Dawn, well, the first question that came to mind is maybe we should start with the question first of what is Tantra, and how does that apply to sex?
Right.
And then I'll ask you my other question.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's a great one because everyone's curious. What is Tantra? You hear a lot about it, you see a lot on television or online, but not too many people really understand what it is. And I was thinking about this as I was preparing to come up here today, and I would like to describe Tantra like in the context of a relationship, because I think that's something a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
So when you think about, most all of us have fallen in love at some point in our lives. And we have that initial chemistry and intensity at the beginning of a relationship. Usually when we're in that phase, we experience also a lot of creativity, a lot of feeling sort of invincible, like a lot of things come online that are really positive for us in the early stages of a healthy relationship. And at some point, my theory is we feel like it's too much. There's too much good coming in, and we begin to shift the focus, or we begin to sort of reach an upper limit feeling, and we start to change how we're relating with our partner, or we become very busy with work, or very busy with the kids, or very busy with something else, because that initial intensity, everybody says, it's not going to be this way forever.
Right.
Tantra is different in saying that that intensity is an invitation to us to grow our capacity to experience more of life. So the whole path of classical Tantra wouldn't be focused necessarily on an interpersonal relationship. It's our relationship with the divine, which is the exalted or the actualized experience of ourselves and of life. And it's saying that when you have those boosts of energy, when you enter a relationship, when you start a new job, when you have a baby, that's actually meant to stretch us. We're actually meant to grow at that time, not try to find a way to manage it and diminish it.
I see.
So classical Tantra does that through the very esoteric practices, things like yantras and mantras that we've heard about, different kinds of yogas. Neo-Tantra, which is what I teach, is teaching us how to do that in relationship, how to communicate, how to touch one another, how to make love, so that we're constantly stretching our capacity to experience more of the goodness of life instead of just keeping ourselves at this ceiling limit.
Right, this narrow band. Yeah, I think, so are you talking also then about just this experience of the sensuality of life? It's not just ascribed to sex, which is people want to reduce Tantra to just sex.
Well, I love that you said this. I feel like most people have no idea what sex is because they've only thought of sex as two people naked in a bed. We have this limited idea of what sex is.
Right.
Sex is so much more than that. It's our interaction with life. It's the sensual interplay we're having in every moment.
Right.
For so long in this culture, we've been taught to be ashamed of that. That's something that only happens behind closed doors Saturday nights when the kids are in bed. And then we've cut off a lot of the goodness we can get from life, a lot of the pleasure that we get from life that then supports our sexual relationship. Instead of our partner being the only place where we're getting sensual fulfillment, all of life becomes this incredible spectrum of sensual interaction that then feeds and informs the intelligence of our sexual relationship with our partner. And the sexual relationship with our partner is something that occurs, of course, when we're naked in bed. That's a lot of fun. That's very beautiful. It's very deep. It's very bonding. But it's also in a conversation about the budget. It's in planning the kids' college. It's in all those things. We don't have to make those things work. We can actually enjoy the duties of life and realize that that can inform and feed our sexual relationship in deepening as we grow older. And I know we'll get to this later, but I feel it's really important for people to realize we are not meant to be sexual in our 40s, 50s, 60s the way we're sexual in our 20s.
Right, yeah.
It's supposed to change.
Right.
But we're limited by that.
I know. I have people come in all the time, in their late 50s or 60s, and they're not having sex the way they used to, and I find out what the problem is. It's because they're still holding on to this idea about when they were 20, and they're in a different body altogether now. So there were a couple things that you said that I want to come back to. One is, I think what you're saying is that our sensuality, our eroticism, our sexuality should be self-generated. And I think all too often in our culture, there's this idea that you should make me feel a certain way, or you should bring me to orgasm, as opposed to my responsibility for my body and what I'm bringing to you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think we see images in movies and we read novels, and we get this idea that my partner is the answer to my prayers, right? My partner is finally here. Now I can practice Tantra because I found someone. And honestly, our self-practice is as, if not even more important than our partner practice. We bring the gems of our own sexual relationship with ourselves to our partner, what we've cultivated, what we've honed on our own, what we've learned about ourselves. And people think, oh, does she mean I'm supposed to be masturbating all the time?
Right.
I think masturbating is great, masturbate every day or whatever feels right to you. But what I'm really talking about is noticing in yourself where the doors are for your sexuality to grow, where is your edge, and then to take it upon yourself to do the psychological work, to come and work on your psychology, where you're stopping your openness and your giving and receiving, because sex is both. It's giving and receiving. And so if I'm in a relationship, finally found my man, and now he gives me the best orgasms of my life, that relationship has a very short shelf life, because it's just counting on that initial, infatuation phase.
Right.
It doesn't lead into a deepening of a relationship where I learn how to give back what I'm receiving, and I learn how to open more and deepen my own understanding of the, I keep saying it, the intelligence of sex. This also relates to classical Tantra. When we're practicing in the temples in India, we make offerings, and these offerings are all offerings they signify different parts of the body and the 5 senses, just like you were saying earlier. But when we make the offering to the deity, we always visualize the deity giving it back to us. It's a circuit.
Oh, lovely. Right.
This is what sex and relationship is meant to be.
Yeah, as opposed to, like you said, just putting everything on the other solely. I mean, that's such a burden to consider, really. So I had another question, but I think it just flew out of my head. But what brought you to the desire to devote your life to this path?
That is such a great story.
Okay.
I always loved sex, always was curious about sex, reading about sex, studying about sex. And I also had I grew up in Tennessee, so I actually had a very innocent relationship with sex, very much about nature and being in nature and just in the workings of how the world works. And so this curiosity in sex led me to become sexual in my teens, late teens. Sure. It's pretty normal. I was sweet 16, never been kissed. And then when I became sexual, I realized there was something missing. Somehow what I'd been reading wasn't what was happening in bed. And like we were saying earlier, I took it upon myself to really work on that and discover it. And then what happened for me was I started to have experiences in sex where I felt myself supercharged with energy, and that energy would last for days, if not weeks. And not only that, I was sharper and more focused in my work. My work took off, my career exploded, my relationships with my family started to change, and I knew it was related to something that was happening, which is probably the fact that I was enjoying sex, but I was also doing my inner work to show up to the relationship. And then there was a day where sex became everything I'd ever read about and imagined, and in that moment I knew that this was the only thing I wanted to do the rest of my life. Wow. And I made that commitment. I was like 31 years old.
Wow. And so who have you been your primary influences or teachers? Because I think when people hear Tantra, somebody said this to me recently also, the only thing I have is Sting prolonging his orgasm. And so it gets really reduced to this sort of weird soundbite.
Yeah, it gets really reduced to this soundbite. So I think that I realized that Tantra is a way of life and a way of living. And that, maybe ask your question again, because now I'm getting lost. Well, it's not how long we last, that's for sure.
Well, I was asking you who your teachers or primary influence have been, and what tradition specifically you
Yes. See,
are.
This for me, my whole life has been sort of a sexual life.
Mm-hmm.
Sex the way I define it,
Right.
not the way our culture defines it. Self-discovery, and also living in integrity with what I know I'm capable of. I've always been excited about that, and my way has been more body. So I had that initial experience, that esoteric experience sexually, where I was like, wow, this is everything sex can be. 2 weeks later, I'm looking in the LA Weekly. There's a business card size ad that said the art of sex magic. And if it would have said Tantra, I would have turned the page because I'd never heard of Tantra.
I see.
But sex and magic, I understood that. And so I signed up for a workshop. I was 31 years old, went to White Lotus in Santa Barbara. I'm like, what are these yurts? I'm carrying my suitcases. I was a marketing professional at that time.
That's funny.
So it was really weird, but I felt like I was right at home because the way that we were interacting with the energetic that sex opens in the body was something I was familiar with. So I studied with Margot Anand, who wrote The Art of Sexual Ecstasy, a great book.
Right.
Highly recommend, amazing woman. Highly recommend if people have a chance to meet her and work with her, do that.
Sure.
And then from there I studied with many of the teachers because that's 26 years ago, 25 years ago, right? So at that time, Tantra was having this surge. It started with Osho. So Osho is one of my teachers and masters. He did a lot of talks on what Tantra can give us as modern day people. And then he spawned all these amazing teachers. So I studied with several of them. And then even when I was studying, it wasn't really for me opening the door to what I had experienced in that direct experience at 30.
I see.
So I developed my own style. I studied with Emily Conrad, doing continuum, studying. I have a degree in psychology from Davis. So all this study, I sort of put together my own program that took us where we want to go. And now I'm studying in India. I'm studying the classical Sri Vidya, which is a Shakta practice. And the primary deity there is an eternal sexual union with her beloved. So this really fit for me. And also seeing sex as beyond two people naked in bed, that there is something that gets unlocked in us, an intelligence, an enteric intelligence that is awakened through sex.
So when you say enteric, you're pointing to the gut, right?
Yes.
And one of the things you're talking about that's so striking to me, and really something that I'm just endlessly, I don't know if it's fascinated, but also somewhat appalled by the lack of interest in our culture about the power of our sexuality, about the power of pleasure. That pleasure has been named dirty, or it's been completely pornographied. And this lack of recognition, just in looking at you and talking to you, that it's this vitality state, it's an aliveness, it's the opposite of depression or anxiety. And that people just, they still talk about down there.
Right.
Like they don't have a relationship with their genitals, especially women. And they don't understand the power that you're talking about. And there's even a well-known sex therapist who talks about leftover sex. He says there's what you won't do and what I won't do, and then as a couple we do what's left over. And that's the narrow band that you're talking about, right?
Wow, yeah.
But many people come to therapy because of that, because they're so afraid of these pleasure states that you're talking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's we don't realize how we've been controlled because pleasure has been so shamed in our culture.
Yeah.
And how it's cut us off from a way that we can be fulfilled, move beyond depression, live into a life. We're not surviving, we're thriving, we're living our true potential. We are animals. We are human beings, are living, breathing, part of nature. Nature's design is for us to procreate.
Right.
Now, I don't have children, you've chosen not to have children, but we're creating in a different way.
Sure.
It's the most powerful creative energy. a lot of the reason people are holding back for sex, they say it's because he doesn't do this or she doesn't say that, but it's really because we have a judgment on exploring pleasure. And really recognizing pleasure is an intelligence. It is like, people take vitamins all day. You want a real vitamin? Get some pleasure going. Because oxytocin, dopamine, people are looking for that outside themselves.
Right.
They're getting that hit outside, and we have access in here. And it creates group bonding. It creates altruism. It takes us forward.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And so when you say it creates altruism, can you say more about in what way?
When we're activating the enteric brain, the vagus nerve, and the whole vagus, so there are two main pathways that our sexual energy and pleasure travels. Sexual pleasure typically travels from the genitals into the sacrum. Sacral nerves transmit the message that we're experiencing pleasure to the brain, and then a feedback loop begins. And there's another way, and that's happening through the vagus nerve, which is more of a front experience of sex. This front experience of sex moves through the heart, moves through the enteric brain, through our digestive system, and into the heart. When this happens, oxytocin is released. Most people don't really realize oxytocin is released in sex anyway, but the front experience of sex is the bonding experience. This is the hot and spicy, which we love. This is the bonding, I'm yours, you're mine, we're creating commitment, which our society has created a big fear around. There's some big fear about that. And so here, when the oxytocin is released, and people need to realize oxytocin is also affecting the shaft of the penis and ejaculation. People don't realize this.
No.
It's not just about mothers with their babies. When that happens, we start to feel and learn about each other. They did these studies on nematodes, so lately I've been studying nematodes, and the way the nematodes learn about effective and confident sex, which is procreation, which they need, and how that creates a group success, like genetic success. Also, it creates a place where if you're doing well, I'm doing well.
Oh, wow.
Right? And that's the altruism. When I start to feel my oxytocin and I'm learning about my environment through my senses as opposed to what I believe based on what I've read, what I've learned, then true altruism happens. I realize it's not survival of the fittest anymore. It's we're all going to get there together. And you get excited about seeing the synergy that we're built for.
Right.
We're actually built for that.
That's beautiful, because that really ties into empathy and the good of the whole, that I'll get mine when you get yours, as opposed to you'll get yours when I get mine, which is more the classic conditioning we have in our culture, which is a kind of a stingier holding sense. So you're really talking about building autonomic capacity, building capacity in the nervous system, which creates just more joy states, as you say, more possibility, more aliveness and present awareness in life.
It does, and more compassion.
Yeah.
And more empathy, just like you were saying. And I love, you have the greatest sound bites, I love that, like you'll get yours when I get mine, and those things. We needed that maybe in our evolution to really look out for ourselves and make sure we got what we needed. But it's like trying to have sex like a 20-year-old. Like, how long is that going to make you happy? And those of us who are maturing, you realize how much joy you get from seeing others excel.
Yeah.
And how it does give to you. It makes your success even better. And same in sex. We were just talking about this morning. Like, it used, like in Western, in Europe, typically families will get together after work. They stop working. Their primary relationship in life is not work.
Right.
It's with each other
family,
and
and friends,
And they sit down and they have 2-hour, 3-hour dinners.
Meals, right.
And they share, and they're building that empathy and that altruism, which builds an intelligence in the body. It evolves us.
Yeah.
And we're here in LA working our brains out, and we all do. I do it, we all do it, we love it, but it gives us that false feeling of moving forward.
Right, and it's very isolating also. And something else you're saying I think is key is that when we can start to see our partners in that way, because so often I think people they collapse their partners down into these reductive ways, and it's all about their judgments of what they're not doing right and how they're not doing well or what they're not giving me. That's why I think in part we have a 50% divorce rate, as opposed to coming towards our partners with this altruism, with this being able to see from this place of love and compassion and caring, and recognizing that I'm as imperfect as he or she is. as opposed to I'm right and there's something broken, so I'll just go get a new one.
Exactly. And this is one of the things I love about you and your work too, is how you see both sides. You see the big picture.
Yeah.
And how, it's like anything. If I'm whining and complaining, my partner doesn't do that. What am I focusing on? I'm focusing on what I don't like. And it's as simple as focusing on what I do like and what is working, and starting to give to that. I've seen, in Santa Monica, there's this big thing about women telling men that they need to be more conscious. And I'm, oh God, we're going in such the wrong direction. Love men. And discover how conscious your partner is
already, right?
Right,
yes.
and work on the things together. Come to the table. I say this, with people I'm working with. Come to the table with a solution. Mm-hmm. You've got something that's uncomfortable. Doesn't mean there's not stuff to work on.
Sure.
Come to the table with what you want to work on, and come with a possible workable solution, rather than just dumping it.
Yeah.
I'm unhappy.
Right.
So now I'm going to get someone who will make me happy.
But also the implication is, and you need to do something about it.
You've now made me unhappy.
Right.
So what's going to change? And how fun is that? That's no fun, whether you're on a sports team, in a work relationship, or in a marriage. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't make positive people, and it doesn't make good sex.
Yeah, I think, so this is really a paradigm shift and a paradigm buster is what you're talking about. And I do think it's evolutionary, because now what we're seeing is so many people looking for alternative sexual practices, alternative ways to be in relationship. Maybe more people instead of one person is better. And who knows? I mean, not one thing is good for everybody. But I've been increasingly fascinated by this idea of what it takes to be monogamous over time, and how some people have capacity for it and some people don't. And if people don't, for them not to feel shame about it, but to start to explore themselves instead of changing partners all the time, or thinking more partners is going to be the better way to go.
Yes. Yeah, it's just like, going on television. It's like the limited capacity to focus, right? People just click through the channels instead of stopping on one and watching a whole program. Right? So clicking through partners, never get a chance to do the work on ourselves. And monogamy, if we stay awake in our monogamous relationships, is one of the most incredible self-development paths on the planet.
I would agree.
Right? But we get busy with work, or we change partners, we get a divorce, instead of diving deeper. And when I was teaching youve a few years ago, and this is this island off the coast of Spain, and we were all talking. It was afternoon break. Which beach should we go to? Should we go to this beach, the nude beach? Should we go to this beach, the beach where they serve drinks? And then I said, there's only one beach. It's like realizing there's only one man or woman, really.
Yes.
You're interacting with your capacity to open to intimacy.
Right.
That's the key, and that's what maturity shows us. And we live in a culture where not only are we having sex at 20, we're living in relationships as 20-year-olds. Nothing wrong with being 20. Being 20 is beautiful. That's your time of exploration.
Yeah, for sure.
And then as you get older, it's about development.
Right, and I'm always shocked how stunted people's sexuality is, in their 40s and 50s. And I say, this is so sort of stupid, but I say, you don't wear the same jeans you wore at 20. You don't have the same hairstyle you had at 20. Why is your sexuality dated? Why haven't you updated your sexuality?
I love that.
Right? What you like, what you don't like, what you know about how this body's working today, as opposed to this old, you're dragging around some old...
I know, and trying to reconstitute it, add some more water, let's make it happen. Yeah, so I have a question for you. What is the difference in sexuality at 20 and, say, sexuality at 50? What are some of the things that shift and grow?
Well, I think as people become more mature, they actually have greater capacity for intimacy, because we seem less concerned and less self-conscious, as I see in people that are younger. People are so concerned when they're younger about how they look and what they're saying and if it's okay. And as people get older, they just don't care about those things anymore. So our age definitely shifts our capacity for being closer. And with that has to come a great acceptance of our bodies, and letting go of body shame, and that's a big thing also. I mean, people are so afraid of the human body and how it moves and what it does and what it looks like. So there are opportunities for people to grow themselves up into an adult sexuality in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, as a form of, as you're saying, a form of development. Because sex is not about a drive anymore. Like when you don't have a drive, when you're not horny, when you're not wanting to have sex with everybody that walks by, then what? And I hear that from couples all the time, saying, well, or women will say, well, none of my friends are having sex right now. And it's like, well, do you want to be like them? Or do you want to do something different?
Oh, yeah. I mean, having sex is the best beauty treatment on the planet. Your eyes are shining, your skin is glowing. It's so good for you. And I do find that, you know, when I'm meeting a lot of times with people, like my clients maybe who are in their 60s, and they're like, well, I don't feel lust for her. And I'm like, you still feel that that's the reason to have sex?
Right.
There are other reasons to have sex. Yeah. You know, there's intimacy, there's heart, there's, you know, there's so many other reasons. We don't have to be driven by chemistry once we're, you know, past 50 and into those years. Then it's deeper, it's more rich, it's more texture. It's like fine wine or, you know, beautiful walk in nature. It's something that gives you a lot, and it's learning how to receive all of that and not to try to just say, well, I don't feel, like you said, horny, so I'm not going to have sex today.
Yes.
That's crazy. That's the only reason you have sex? Because you feel horny? What a tragedy.
It is a tragedy, because it is a positive emotional connection with oneself and with the other. And there's something about, you know, this notion of quiet love. When we think of quiet love, we think about mothers just watching their babies sleep. Right? And then there's exuberant love when the baby is like, you know, so excited about something and mom's excited with the baby. But this kind of quiet love that comes with walking in nature and just being purely present to the wow of it. And to be able to have that kind of connection, that intimacy with a partner, creates a deepening of the erotic. And people use intimacy as a euphemism for sex. And it's not that at all, right?
Not at all. I think when we rely on sex for our intimacy, we're going to be really disappointed. You know, as sex as far as naked two people in a bed. You know, the sex needs to be happening 24/7 in how we interact with each other. That if I realize I woke up in a bad mood, that I deal with that before interacting with my partner. So that I'm reverent with my partner. You know, this is someone I've chosen to be with, so they're extraordinary. And so how do I let intimacy be a part of what I'm cultivating all throughout the day? You know, not overworking, not getting myself to the point where I'm so tired I can't be present with my partner to hear how his day was. You know, so it's a round the clock way of living as opposed to something we do on the weekend at 2 o'clock on Sunday.
So what would you say if someone told you that, you know, he woke up in a bad mood because his partner put him in a bad mood, and now he's got to be reverential towards her, and he's angry at her, and but he's got to work that out himself.
Well, what I would say is, first I would empathize and say it's never fun to wake up in a bad mood. And then I would say, well, what is it that you would like to have? You know, where is it you want to go? I took a motorcycle driving class once, and they said you're always going to go where you're looking, so look where you want to go. So when you wake up in the morning, you're in a bad mood because maybe you think your partner didn't do something the night before, but you want to be in a positive place with them. So I work a lot with the love languages. So I'll have the guy, I'll say, what is your partner's love language? If it's words of appreciation. So I would say, okay, start off with words of appreciation. That's going to get you the connection that you're desiring. And then, you know, take a look at that situation that made you feel angry, and what is it that you can redo in that'll take it forward instead of expecting your partner to do something. Like, let's say you approached her for sex and she said no last night. That's something I hear a lot. Then rather than go to her, you always say no and you never want sex with me. That is not the way to turn a woman on. I'm sorry, that is not going to work. So if you go in and you realize what you really want is connection. So the first thing you do is what creates connection with her is words of appreciation. So I appreciate that you're here with me. It's been 35 years.
Right, yeah.
And then you go from that place and then create what creates connection feeling for her. So again, it's like giving and realizing if we give truly selflessly, then we're going to have that connection, and it's more likely that the natural closeness is going to happen, or that she would be open to coming to see someone like you.
Right, I was going to say, and also in that, there may be very real concerns or contentions people have with each other that they need to air out and straighten out so they can get to that place also.
Yeah.
So it's not about spiritual bypass and leaping over upsets and resentments, but it's also not about just dragging them around with you.
Yeah, it's both. It's realizing, like, can you get your boat in calm water? And then start to work on the issues that are there. But as long as we're blaming each other, nobody's feeling motivated to do that. So, and I really encourage all my male clients and female clients to spend time bringing themselves pleasure. Whether that's getting a massage or reading a nice book of poetry or whatever it is. Like, are you attending to your sensual needs consistently?
Right.
So then if my partner says, not tonight, I'm not feeling rebuffed. I'm maybe more in understanding, and then we can come and work on it together.
So I like that too, people taking responsibility for what turns them on. I think that women are just good with hot water. It's like, give us a hot bath and a hot cup of tea or a spa treatment, and we're relaxed and ready for sex. So it's just about knowing what's true for you. So when you talk about this term Neo-Tantra, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, Neo-Tantra is something, a term that Osho coined back in the 70s. Neo-Tantra is looking specifically at our relationships and the sexual energy in our body, and there's specific practices to maximize our potential with our sexual energy, how to channel it, how to be aroused. A lot of people have no idea how their arousal works. They have no idea. It really is something, it's like a yoga. It's something you can practice. It's something you can cultivate.
I see.
How to learn to channel that arousal through the whole body so that our sexual experience isn't just genital based. It's moving into the heart. It's moving into our intellect. We're able to have that vitality and that clarity and that sort of pizzazz in every part of the body. That is possible, and Neo-Tantra teaches you how to do that. It also teaches you how to have a conversation with your partner, how to set up a relationship that's going to work for both of you, and how to deal with those challenges, which will come, because we're going to constantly be expanding our limits. And instead of seeing you as the problem, instead of going, wow, I'm really at my limit right now, I need to learn a new way of interacting.
So neo meaning new?
New.
And so does that mean that Osho took the maybe esoteric teachings, more the Indian teachings, and brought them to the present day during his time?
It's a little different than that. That's
Okay.
that's really good. I think a lot of people think that. What he did, he was more of a philosopher. So he took the philosophy and created practices for modern day people. He didn't take the practices themselves and modify them.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people do that. They go into Neo-Tantra kind of looking for the classical practices or vice versa. And it's not there. You won't find it.
I see.
So you're looking at what's the goal. The goal is for us to experience in classical or neo, I mean there are many goals. One of the goals is to realize that at the center of everything there is this merging, there is this one point. It's where the masculine and feminine are completely merged. Most of us experienced some of that ecstasy or bliss in our sexual experience. That in itself is what creates how we see the world. How we see the world is what creates the world. It sounds very woo-woo, but there are lots of physics behind it.
Of course.
And so Neo-Tantra and Classical Tantra are teaching us that my work with my partner is shifting how I see the world, and how I see the world is shifting my ability to merge and understand my partner. So he took those concepts which are classical, and then created more psychology practices, yoga practices, energetic practices to achieve those states.
So is there a simple practice that you can tell us about right now?
Yeah, there's lots of practices. One, since we're talking about the enteric brain, so let's just do this all together right now, people who are listening in. This is a breath that will help us calm and come into the parasympathetic nervous system. When we're sexual, we need both. We need the sympathetic nervous system to feel the intensity. That's the increased heart rate and breathing, so that the blood is flowing faster. Then the parasympathetic is where you actually sense and feel and sink into those feelings. And so what you'll do is just let yourself sit comfortably and notice that you're breathing. You don't have to change your breathing. But what I'd like you to do is to start to breathe in for about a count of 5. So just breathe in for about a count of 5, and then hold your breath for about a count of 5. Don't make yourself feel panicky. And then exhale for a count of 10. So it's basically breathe in, hold the breath the same amount of time you breathed in, and then breathe out twice as long. So this begins to cue the parasympathetic nervous system to come online. And this is where we start to feel, you're probably starting to feel, I'll check in with you, but I tend to start to feel more relaxed. Energy drops down more into my pelvis.
For sure, I even feel energy in my legs.
So I'm not so much up in here and all the things I've got to get done. I'm more present for my sexual connection with myself or my partner.
That's beautiful. That's so simple and easy.
Very, very, very simple. You know, we see all these Kama Sutra, different positions, these different things, and people feel overwhelmed. And if you can be present with your partner and be really in your body, then it doesn't matter. You two can be doing missionary. It's going to feel like all those wild experiences because you're so in the moment and you're really appreciating just the humanity of each other.
Yeah, that's lovely. So where do you think the future of sort of sexuality in the world is going? I mean, we've got, you know, everything feels like it's percolating and moving super fast right now. And I hear a lot from colleagues, especially people that work in the sex toy industry and sexologists. Like, they're always talking about the Germans. Like, the Germans are like on the forefront of all this incredible latex and sex toy products and bari, you know, rope play, and everything is like, we look to the Germans for, quote, sex and sexuality. And then we've got this kind of crazy world of pornography here, and people trying to figure things out. And it's hard for me to tell with the din if we are moving more towards the kind of practices you're talking about, just kind of where the tides are right now.
I love that, looking to the Germans. And they do, they have like, I mean, how fun are all of these toys and things to play with.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we're people. And it's two people together or more, you know, whatever kind of relationship people are choosing. My hope is that we're beginning to realize that sex is a forgotten part of our intellect. And it's a forgotten part of our altruism and what is bringing us and moving us forward as human beings. That we're beginning to realize that sex is far more than something that's happening genitally. That it's a way we light up our system and we begin to evolve and push into the edges of our understanding of what we're capable of and what this world really is. That we're learning ways to cultivate and make friends with our sexual energy, to take responsibility for it, like you said. And my hope is that we're really seeing sex almost like a muscle isn't the right word, but we all go to the gym and we work out, or we work on our brain and developing it, or our marketing strategies. But we've never really seen what sex can really be. And I have a feeling it can be the base for an incredibly beautiful, thriving life. And I think that's the direction we're going. A lot of the shame is dropping away. And people realizing that sex is more than what happens just genitally between two people. I feel like that's the direction. I think the toys are really fun things to play with, someone you have a good relationship with. But I think the key is realizing that there's an untapped potential and almost like a fire that we have been separated for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that we're ready to touch back into that. It's empowering. It clears the mind. It makes us confident. It makes us successful. It makes us healthy.
Yeah, I just had a thought, and again it just left because there was so much there, Dawn. But this kind of battle of the sexes right now, you know, the whole Me Too movement and who's responsible for whom, and consent, and all of those conversations feel like they could largely be not eradicated, but softened considerably if people were thinking more in these terms, as opposed to it's your fault or you did this or who did that, and the kind of division that takes on there, which feels really reductive and cruel, actually.
Yes, and I think, again, it's that we're not realizing that a lot of that is coming from the same place that shames pleasure. Pleasure is shamed. Sexual pleasure is shamed. If I, as a single woman, enjoy sex with a partner that I'm not married to, that is shameful, right? So all these things, all these limitations are put on top. And like with the Me Too movement and things that are happening there, I feel like, for me, I grew up in a different time. And I saw my sexual experiences as stepping stones to growing into a woman. There were lots of times I had sex with someone that I wouldn't choose to have sex with again. And power play situations that I was innocent and naive to. And I learned, but the key there was I didn't punish myself for having those experiences. And I'm not saying that it's okay to hurt someone sexually, but I think also when those things happen, can we also not shame ourselves that we were in that experience? And also the Tantric perspective says, rather than say it shouldn't happen, we instead say, why is it happening? That's a whole different perspective. So when someone comes to me who's been in a Me Too situation, I have had that, I look at the big picture. What's happening for both people? Why did this happen? Not that it shouldn't have happened, but how did it happen? How did it come into play? And what needs to happen on the other side?
Sure. And that's more of a position of responsibility instead of pure victim. Sometimes people are completely victimized, but all too often I see this also in relationships where it's not going well or where there's betrayal sometimes. It's very easy to feel victimized, that somebody's done something to me, because in part they have. But then where am I in this picture also? Why did this happen? How come I didn't see this? What part of me allows this to go on? And that's a very unpopular position to take with some people at some times too.
This is another thing that I love about you. I feel like you're so strong, and you're holding for all of us to be responsible, and that gives us freedom.
It does,
and it gives us a lot of self-confidence if we learn that.
And I want to say that's an aspiration, and sometimes, like I said, we are completely victimized. If somebody hits you in a car and you're in a bad accident, you didn't do that to yourself. You're going to feel the effects of that, but at some point later to say, where was I? What happened that I didn't see that? What could I have done better? What was my part in this possibility, as opposed to just collapsing into being a victim the rest of my life, because that is such a hole that is not a vitality state.
Right, it's not growing you.
It isn't.
If you have a situation and you look at what did I learn from the situation, we're going to grow, and we're going to become more and more successful.
And what can I do better next time? How can I not make this happen again? So along the lines of responsibility. Well, again, I lost my question. So is there anything else that you can think of along the lines of what we're talking about? Maybe my question will come back.
I think, and this is like, where you and I are talking about right now is like, for me, it's like minefield, because the victim mentality in our culture is so strong.
Right.
And what we don't realize is, like you said, yes, it's important when things happen that we don't feel comfortable with sexually, that we learn how to communicate that, how to shift the ways that we're bringing ourselves into those situations, that we do make changes inside, but also to realize that when we stay in that place of feeling that something was done to me and I have, like there's no way out for me, then the so-called perpetrator has won 10 times over.
Right.
Now my sexual life is ruined, and and instead kind of looking at, like we were saying, to look at every situation as a way that we're learning and growing. A lot of, sometimes I imagine a world where sex isn't special. It's just natural.
Right, yeah.
A lot of this would fall away then.
Sure.
So much of it would fall away if sex was something that was just something that we saw as a normal part of life.
Well, I do think that's the shame is the major barrier to that. because the way that we think about it, socialize people with it, make it so taboo, make it special, as opposed to it's a normal bodily function and everybody does it. And even when somebody's sexuality has been tampered with very young or they've been abused in some ways, to be able to heal and come up out of that victimhood into being a victor, and to know that maybe, that body is not going to respond the way another one does, but we're all so different.
Yes.
Like our sexuality is as unique as our fingerprints. And so to not, like you said, shame yourself, to say, wow, this is how I'm put together.
Yes.
In just the same way that, I'm tall and someone else is short and I have brown hair and they have blonde hair, and it's all just different.
Exactly. It's like, I have a little story here, and we can see if we want to keep it in or not, because this is very personal. I share it with all my students. When I was in my 20s, I got herpes. But many people get herpes. And at the beginning, I thought my sex life is over.
Right.
I was just starting, and already it's over. And I could have become a victim, like the man who gave it to me, and he's ruined my life and all of that. And yet, it's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because it's made me more conscious of my body.
Sure, yeah.
I have conversations about safe sex much earlier in dating than I would have before. And I've met amazing men who are so compassionate, so loving. Like, I understand this, and it creates more intimacy.
Sure.
Right, by being the human being that I am, not trying to feel like, oh, I'm now tainted, something is wrong.
That's right. And so to have that kind of comfort and self-acceptance, and to be able to say, this is a part of who I am, is just like saying I'm single, or I'm divorced, or I have a child, or it's just life now.
You're inviting someone to be closer to you.
Yeah.
And it's not also about oversharing. I don't sit there and talk to them about every outbreak I've ever had.
Sure.
It's also learning about those boundaries. And I think this is an important key too when we've had sexual experiences that we feel like have shaped our lives, is having healthy boundaries and realizing there are things that I talk to my therapist about and we work on together. And then there's what I share with my partner to move our intimacy forward. He's not my therapist.
Right.
He's there for me to grow with. And so I think it's also understanding that, and I think sometimes we get confused with that, sometimes expecting our partner to be our therapist and our lover.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of confusing messages in our culture about who's who and who's going to be what to me and how I'm supposed to use or be with that person. And there's this notion that my partner is just the end-all be-all and he's going to provide me everything, which just isn't true, and it's a burden on the other person also.
Absolutely. And it's like when we wake up in the morning, what is our relationship? And if we have different phases of life. Sometimes we're parents together, and that's what we wake up in the morning. Sometimes we're business partners, we wake up in the morning. But can we wake up also in the morning and this is my lover? How can I treat this man as my lover? It doesn't mean I'm wearing sexy lingerie. People immediately want to go to this highly sexualized. It's like, how do I adore this person and adore myself so that that's the connection that we're enjoying in the hours that we have free, which are limited.
What you just said, I think, is an incredibly difficult thing for people, because they get into the rut of being householders together or parents together, or they've been together for so long that they have a very difficult time seeing their partner as a love object, as a lover, or being sexy, or that sexual person that they fell in love with. And I'm curious about what you think about that, because it's a difficult thing to point people towards. And I feel like I have a facility with this with my partner because I'm very aware of it, and he's also very good of shifting in and out of these states. Because we're a myriad of things to each other all the time. But I never lose that feeling of like, oh, I want to have sex with him. Certainly not when I'm angry with him, or we're like dragging like chairs and boogie boards back from the beach and it's hot, right? There are times when it's just not there. But there are other times when it's like, wow.
Yeah, you remind yourself. And that's who you are. You keep bringing yourself back to what matters to you in life, and don't let yourself get swept into just the details and the one thing after another. Like you keep him in that special light, and it's something you do intentionally, and it's something we can all do intentionally. we're still, a lot of us, looking for someone else to save us, to give us the golden key, to show us how our lives can be better. And it's how we wake up in the morning and how we look at each other. It's absolutely possible, although it's not necessarily as easy because the brain gets habituated, right? And it wants to see something the way it locks in. But I do that practice with couples when they come to see me. I take them through this whole session about really seeing each other for the very first time again. And without fail, I have clients, they're right back at the first moment. They have access to everything in their body they had access to then, if not more, because of the years. And I say, see, this is what's possible. But because of the way the world's set up, our energy is being pulled into other places that aren't as vital and aren't as empowering.
So you do a lot of work with couples, and especially couples where they're sort of intractable. They're just so angry and they're done. And then you work your magic with them and something else happens. And I'm really curious about that space that you just pointed to with people, especially when they've been together for a long time, and what it takes for them. You open that window for them to see each other for the first time, and it's deeper because they've been together for so long. How do you encourage them, or what do you do to get them to, what are the practices for them to keep deepening that? Because I imagine that can be terrifying for people if they haven't had sex for years, or now they've had that electric connection again, and it opens, and does it close again quickly?
Yeah, so this is a great question, because yes, I've had clients who've been married, say, 35 years, haven't had sex for the last 10. So coming in and saying, oh, and now you're going to have sex, that's like way too far to take it. So they have that experience of seeing each other, and in the same practice, same session, I'm teaching them very simple ways to begin to wake up their way of sensing each other again, through touch, through seeing, through listening to each other, waking up that sort of refreshed brain, like the very first time. So I teach very gentle, in fact, I will say, don't make love yet. Don't go into the bedroom yet. Let's not cross the wires. Because also a lot of times people have a way of being sexual that really wasn't reflective of who they really were. It wasn't what they really wanted. So I say, let's recreate a blank slate. We're back to the brand new. And then we layer in, it's like getting married and getting like this premarital counseling that we all never got. So I say, take them true. And I base this on Neo-Tantra and Classical Tantra, the different ways that we open our body to true intimacy.
I see.
So there are steps. And then it's gradual. It's not like suddenly tonight's the night. I mean, how much pressure is that? Especially the man's now 70 and he's like, what am I going to do? It's more, it just gradually starts to happen. And then that erotic energy of a 70-year-old wakes up. And they're able to follow it rather than feel like they need to do something. That is incredible. And just so people know, sex gets better and better and better and more beautiful as we age. And it's learning how to follow that maturity and let our senses be filled with one another the way that only a mature person can. Whether that's the 20-year-old maturity, the 30-year-old, the 40, it's beautiful at every age and stage. So the work is not about 0 to we're in bed. It's about reconnecting people with their natural sexual magnetism.
Yeah, that is so beautiful and generative, and what's the word? It has to do with reverential also, as opposed to this idea that we just collapse as we age and we just kind of disappear into nothingness.
It kind of becomes like this secret society. You sort of know, you can look at people and you're like, yeah, you know it too, don't you? There's this way that life just keeps getting richer and more beautiful. In truth, it's like there's this, it's Yeats, I teach in Ireland a lot, and he said the world is filled with magic waiting for our senses to grow sharper. It's really true, and as we get older, our senses get sharper.
They do,
and we feel more, and we're capable of more. And are we willing to feel that much? Many people aren't. Because it will break your heart. It will completely break you open. Life becomes so meaningful, and then you realize, okay, we've got like how many more years, and it gets more beautiful. And it's real courage and bravery, and that's what we do together as lovers, is we walk with each other through that.
Yeah, there's something so profound about what you're saying, because this idea of being able to fall in love with love itself, mostly I think we see that in nature, to stand at the shores of the ocean and its magnificence and recognize it as our very own, or to see, the universe in a flower and to be moved to tears in that way, is that kind of deep present awareness. And so I do think that comes with maturity, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not waiting until we're dying or getting a divorce and then realizing all that it really meant to us. And it is like we keep using the word reverential and reverence, and that's something also that's really gone out of style. People are probably thinking, "Ooh, who wants to be reverent? It's supposed to be sexy." And those are people who've never experienced sex above the belt. Sex has never entered their heart, and I would say most of your listeners have let sex enter their heart and have realized that the classical tantric practices are based in devotion. There are aspects of the brain that will only open when we're in devotional practice. There are things we have access to, states of excellence and mastery as human beings, that we only access when we become humble, when we become sensitive, when we become empathic. That's when the true majesty of life begins to reveal itself. It's not just about putting in hours and getting some money and having a good retirement.
Right. So is there anything else you want to leave us with, Dawn? Because this has been a delicious conversation.
I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. You're an extraordinary woman, an absolute inspiration. I'm really honored that you have me here and that you see me and believe in what I believe in.
Well, my pleasure. It's been my great joy to get to know you and for us to share our work together in this way, and I'm glad we have this forum to do it too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out other episodes of my podcast. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our newest uploads, including workshops, training programs, and our monthly CEU lectures and webinars. You can also keep in touch with us via Instagram and Twitter at Alex Katehakis. Links are down below in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.